Well, hello folks, and welcome to episode 250 of Retropower Uncut. And this week it is just me, because Cal's on holiday. In fact, next week it'll be just me as well. Yeah, this week it's just me, and here we are in the fabrication shop. Very quiet at the moment. We're actually recording this video quite early on. I think it's, I don't even know what time it is. Just gone 8 o'clock in the morning. A very early start on videos this week. Just want to get everything sorted, and we've got a girl coming in for some work to do some work experience here as well. So I wanted to get this done before she comes in, so I can give her a little tour and get her placed with one of the chaps for the first step of her little bit of work experience here. So that'll be good for her. Hopefully she'll enjoy it. Anyway, on to E-Type. Fairly brief on this week. Various progress in various little areas, but nothing hugely visible. There's not sparks flying and all that excitement. Basically 3 areas. One, George in the CAD area, which we'll come on to in a bit. One is I've done a little bit more work on the front end in terms of the coolant pipe work. I've dug out the original coolant header tank, which we're not going to use because I thought it was originally a brass pressing, but it's not. It's a steel pressing actually. So we're definitely not going to be using that. But we've popped that on just to see where the pipework runs go, just to check everything's going to work in the way that I think it's going to work, which I think it is. I think everything should work according to plan there. But the next stage really is to continue what had been started previously with the water pump feed pipe, basically the bottom hose arrangement, which takes in the oil cooler, which we mentioned previously, which is built into the water to oil heat exchanger that's built into the sump. It's sorting out that pipe work because it's quite complex, it's quite fiddly, that pipe work. So I was just trying to get the next stage of that in place while I could, because a lot of the other work really hinges on the positions of those pipes. So I've been doing a little bit of work on that. And then the other chunk of work is the rear hubs. We've mentioned those a couple of times. They were delivered, they were incorrect. There was a bit of a blunder by supplier on those, and they were made wrong. However, I took the opportunity while I had those, the outer part of the detail on those hubs, basically the tricky bit, was actually correct. The bit that was just a straight copy of the original Jaguar hub managed to get wrong, but the outer part, which is the new part, if you like, the bit that takes the wire wheel and the brake disc to allow the wire wheel and brake disc to all fit to the original Jaguar X300/XJ40 type bearing arrangement, the outer part was correct. So what I've done is actually made a dummy hub using a Mark II Jag wire wheel hub and Jag X300 hub, both machined down, machined the flanges off, machined the wheel flange off the X300 hub, machined the brake mounting flange off the Mark II Jag wire wheel hub, machined all the back out of that, pressed the two together in the lathe and TIG welded them together in the lathe. I've now got a hub that positions the wheel in the same position as the final hubs will, because all that outer detail is correct. Basically from the bearing outer face, the Jag hub uses 2 taper roller bearings, and from the outer face of the outer taper roller bearing outwards, that hub is correct. So we've basically got another one of those hubs made with that dimension exactly the same, so we can trial fit the Dayton wheel centre on the car. Once we build up an upright and build it into the rear end assembly, mock up, build the rear end assembly, we can put that hub in and trial the Dayton wheel centre and get that position correct versus the wheel arch correct, so that we can give Dayton the required offset for those wire wheels, so we can get those into production, because that's been the big push. Is the reason we need the hubs is so that we can get the wheels made, because there is a bit of a lead time on getting the wheels made, obviously. Dayton have been very, very, very good, got us a wheel centre almost straight away. They've been on it. They've been following up with Cal, saying, you know, when do we need to get these wheels into production? They've been on it, but we've been unable to do that because we've not had any hubs. We've been a bit frustrated by that, and yes, we continue to be a little bit frustrated by that, but we now have a mock-up hub, which I can't mount a brake disc on, but that doesn't matter, but I can mount the wheel on in the correct position. So the next stage really is to build up a rear end in a dummy fashion, so that we can trial all the parts and trial that hub, and then we can work out what wheel offsets we need. So that was the final piece of the puzzle for this week, but as I say, no great visual wow progress, just all the slog in the background going on that one. Moving on from that, I'm going to hand over to Bobby again this week. I'm going to let Bobby talk you through the Saab. Again, I'm going to let George take you through some more stuff from the CAD Den in a bit on his other work on this. But I'm going to hand over to Bobby and let him take you through the metallic side of progress on this.
Hello everyone, welcome to the metal shop again from me, Bobby. So I pretty much finished everything from the rear of the seats back to the end of the boot, and what I've been busy with was these little buggers here. They took so much time for figuring out and fabricating as well, because you've got a few planes you have to figure out how to do, and the thing is you just can't place them and hope for the best that after that it'll be all working out fine. So it was a discussion between me and Carl, what the design of the interior of the boot would be. So considering the design of the interior boot, what we're going to have on the face of this, how that's going to be structured and all that, I have to fabricate the whole structure. So this is pretty much what they call them, the parcel shelf pods. They're gonna house the speakers, these 5x7 speakers, which will be just in front of the seat rail, the seat belt rail, in that space. So that will be then, obviously the seat belt rails are hidden underneath as well. So that's other part of them. Then we're gonna have here sort of a nice 3D printed curvy shape, which will be probably clip on and off as a door access for the battery and for the anything else we end up having here. On the side across me, we're gonna have a subwoofer and eventually the amplifier for the audio system and all that, and the cables going from them to the front of the car are going through my stud brace panel there again in the front. Not mentioned in the last video that I have access hole here, so you can access that with a long extension and wobbly end, and do the bolt for the seat belt trio. But then I have another switched hole forward, so the cable is going to go around through here on top of the wheel arch and then straight to the front of the car. So there will be battery cables and tail lights and all that, and then up and everything. So there'll be two legs of the cables going down. So that's done. The next stage is I have to chop the seats. As you remember, the seats are a bit too tall and they look funny in the back of the car, so I have to shorten them about 65 mil, and that will give us the top of the seat will be just level with when the rear quarter window seats are installed. You got the rubber and the frame, because the rear windows is, I think they're flipping out from the back, they're hinged from the front. So when you look from the side of the car, you're gonna see the line of the window and then the top of the seats as all the cars. The strange bit with this is the rear quarter windows are so far back, long, and the seats can't usually, in all the cars, the seats are right behind the seat pillar, so even if you have a taller seats, they're hidden and you can't see them. But right in our situation, they're right through the window, so they look funky. So that's the next job, and then once I do them, I have to find a way to make the strikers where the latches are engaging on both sides, and then we got a nice closing panels again, just closing the gap between the seat and the inner quarter panel. It's about 6-inch gap currently, so that's going to be again a upholstered piece, but I need to make the base, so it's got something to build up with the foam and all that later on. That's the next job. Very happy. And one thing I forgot was when I fabricated this, that's the recess of the battery, and I had the battery obviously sits about, what I'll say, quarter of the battery sits in that pocket, but then on this side I forgot to make a support, so the battery didn't have where to put, and also the clamping brackets as well for the battery. So before I do that middle support today, I had to fabricate the rest of the battery. It's like a battery half tray, if you wish, 2x two top hats going across, joining this bit to this bit, in there to the chassis leg. On them, fabricated 2 clamps. So when you put the battery, you do that clamp. Both clamps are clamping the battery as per OEM style. So that's done. That's one thing less to worry about. Yes, I picked up on 2 comments on the last video. Just I'll mention very shortly. Someone was asking, are we using the original seatbelt reel? We use the original seatbelt reels, but can we source them a new one, like a new old stock? No, we can't. With all our cars, what we do is, if we don't use a brand new seatbelt reels, we just send them over for a refurbishing, and we change the webbing as well. So they're pretty much brand new. The other fun fact was, the seatbelt reels are Saab, but then the buckles on all the cars that we're using are the Audi. So Audi is 2007. This car is 90, between 79 and 93 were produced, these ones. And the male part, the buckle clip, whatever you call it, it just buckles straight in, it clips straight into the Audi. So that was a win-win situation. It's very good. Someone else mentioned if we weight the cars like overall weight and corner balancing and all that. Yes, we do that. Not here. We do that in the den. A year ago, I developed my own weight scales. So the wireless weight scales, you've got a 7-inch touchscreen, and obviously pop in the car. I mean, we don't design the cars all the way like fully on cut and all the weights before we ever start building them. But what we do is we just judge as we build them. We've got the experience to judge where we can position batteries, where we can position arms, where we can position the most heavy components, and with the time, with the experience, when you look at the car, you can predict where it could be too heavy or too light. So we put more weight, kind of ballast on the different bits, or takeoff weight, so we can have a reasonably balanced car at the end. But then these are not high performance super race cars, or something that's going to be on a track and you're shooting for the last 50-50 distribution or crossweight or all that. But we always keep an eye on this. But end of the day, these are cruisers, and they're going to be a race on the extremes, if you wish. So that's not that big of a concern. But yes, we do. Most of our cars have coilovers anyway, so they're adjustable. We adjust the ride heights, and within the ride heights, we can adjust again the corner weight, because we have the opportunity to do that. So yeah, so thank you very much. I'll stop waffling about, and I will see you next week.
So thank you for that, Bobby, and we'll move on to BMW, and exciting progress all around on this. As you can see, looking at it, there is, we mentioned the arrival of these parts, but we've got the bonnet and boot lid both in place. In fact, did we mention the arrival of these parts? I'm not sure we did. I think I held fire. These arrived the week before last. They were very, very quick turnaround. These are from a company called Son of Cobra in the USA. And ordering carbon fibre parts from a company that you've never dealt with before in a long distance fashion, because they're based in California. So ordering parts at that sort of range when you've never dealt with them before is always quite a nerve-wracking experience, because different people's idea on what is good or poor quality is always interesting, shall we say. However, the parts are very good quality. We're very happy with them. I think that's why I'd held off mentioning it before, because we literally hadn't unboxed the parts at the last video I did. So I was a bit nervous about talking about them and praising them until we'd actually seen them. However, we have now seen them, and they are very good. And the benefit to that is that Stu's been able to progress the front and the rear of the car. Now at the rear, he has been continuing the work on the quarter panel that you saw last week, where he made the corner section for the quarter panel, the section where the rear tail light goes into the quarter panel, and the upper corner. So Stu's made those pieces, got those ready to graft in. Martin's cutting some bits in the guillotine. They're clanging fairly well, those bits of aluminium. So yeah, Stu's got the pieces made for the major pieces made for that quarter panel. However, he's hit one of those points in a project where there's a whole stack up of things all linked back to a seemingly irrelevant part that you actually need to be able to complete all of the next stages of things. And basically, Stu needs to get that quarter pinned into its final position to be able to finalise putting those sections into the back of it. But in order to get it into its final position, he needs the inner wheel arch in place. And to get the inner wheel arch in place, he needs to have the inner wheel arch completed. And to have the inner wheel arch completed, he needs to have the suspension turret fitted. And the suspension turret we cannot do until we have the dampers to fit into it. And we are waiting for the dampers from Nitron. Now, that's not to say we're waiting an unreasonable time. They have not long been commissioned to make those dampers. This isn't a point that they're delaying things so much as just we can't progress. Something that we thought was fairly dissociated from that point, we can't actually progress until we have those dampers. We can work from assumption, drawing, etc., and jig drawings, but we don't want to do that. We really just want the actual unit in position on the car. Then we know the clearance to the actual spring that's going to be on there. We've got all the actual parts that have got to fit. Too many times we've worked from drawings and assumptions and that type of thing, and it almost always bites us. It's almost always that, oh yeah, well actually that particular 2 1/4 springs OD is actually a 3mm bigger, and that now makes it rub somewhere, or something like that happens. So what we actually want is the actual spring and damper units that are going on the back. Then we can position them in there. We know what the open and close lengths are. We know what the aim ride height is. Then we can position the top of the turret with the correct plasma cut plate to suit the top mounts for those dampers in place. We can jig it all in place, and we can weld those turrets in. So, long story short, Stu stopped work on the rear to move on to the front, because now we have the carbon fibre bonnet, we have the final bonnet that's going to be fitted to the car. We can position all the front panels. If you remember, rewinding a few weeks, we'd stopped work on the front because we didn't have a means of aligning the front end panel work, because we didn't have a bonnet that hadn't been crashed and bent to within 10 shades of its life. However, we now have a carbon fibre bonnet, which is the one that's going to end up on the car, and Stu can now use that to align all the front panels. The little hitch that he's hit, they're actually bolted on now, but the little hitch he then hit was that during the bending of all the front end of this car, during its history as a bumper car, I think it plied its trade around various fairgrounds, I think. But during one of its bumper car escapades, the bonnet hinges had been bent. So Stu's use of the bonnet to line things up was slightly complicated by the fact that it won't sit at the correct height because both of the hinges have been bent. So Stu's been trying to sort of do his Inspector Clouseau routine, trying to work out exactly what's bent on what hinge and what hinge is right and what hinge is wrong, to then be able to work out what height the bonnet's got to sit at. So it's one of those slightly convoluted processes to work out exactly where everything needs to be. But Stu's very good at that. That was his trade for about 25 years, and he's fairly good at it. So I'll leave him be and let him crack on with that, and he'll have that all sorted out in a jiffy. So that's all moving on very well. Wander past here where Martin is actually doing a little bit of work. The clanging of the aluminium that you heard a minute ago is that Martin's making some sections up for, well, I say for, in conjunction with James, who is based out of the Den, our trimmer, making the rear seats for the Churchill project. This will be something I would touch on in the assembly shop, but I might as well speak of it here because we're here next to these bits now. So these are the lower seat squab sections for the Churchill Mark II Jag Coupe project, and as if by magic, Martin has just presented me with this. This is a piece of 5251H22 2mm thick aluminium that he's just cut on the guillotine, and he is about to shrink this to form a skirt that goes around this edge of the seat. That's going to be shrunk around that corner there. I'll just tip all his tools off. But that's going to be shrunk around that corner there, so he's going to use the air shrinker in a bit, shrink this flange here to send this all the way around this edge, and that's going to basically form the skirt on the front of the seat, because there's a section of the body that these seats sit onto, which is a sort of just a yeah, it's a non-A surface piece of metalwork inside the car, and originally the seat base had an overhanging section that was leather trimmed, or not genuinely was fake leather, but it had trim on it, and we're basically replicating that. We're putting a skirt onto the seat in aluminium. That'll be leather trimmed to match the seat, and that'll cover that metalwork up and just tidy that area up and make it all look nice and neat. So Martin's getting on making those bits up for James, and then he's also going to make a retaining rail for the seat back. So these are the two seat bases. The wheel arches sit in there. There's a seat back that comes up here with an armrest in the centre. Well, that mounts onto a piece of pressed steel basically that's part of the rear bulkhead assembly, and that seat has to hook into that. So Martin's going to make a little rail that can be screwed into the seat back that will probably be made in steel, I think, that one, that will hook over that section on the rear bulkhead and retain the upper part of the rear seat, and then the lower part will be held in either by some clips or by some screws, to be determined. I'm leaving that down to James and Martin. So yeah, rear seat progress going on, so that's what Martin's doing a little bit of there. We're also walking past this bench, I can see something else. We've just received this pedal assembly from Simply Performance. We were waiting for some parts to come back from them. Simply Performance are working on an increasing number of Jaguar parts for us. As I say, we've mentioned them before, very helpful guys. We get a lot of parts from them. They stock hold more of the type of Jaguar parts that we buy than anybody else, so we just generally ask them first now, because they've got the knowledge to know what's scrap and what isn't. They only keep stuff that isn't scrap, and they generally have the parts on the shelf. They generally are on the shelf at a sensible price, basically at the going rate price, not a rip-off, not for free. They're just the going rate, sensible price, and so we get most of the parts from them. This pedal box, the plan is to use, this is a Series 3, although I think a Series 2 is the same, XJ pedal box, Jaguar XJ, so a late 1970s, very early 1980s pedal box. And they're a nice unit. They're very, very well engineered. They're actually a very well thought out piece of engineering. It's from that sort of period of Jaguar's time when they did that sort of thing. They're just a nice unit. The pedal ratio is very good. They do lots of things really well. So we're using one of those in the XJC because that's what it would have had originally, but modified to have a clutch master cylinder in place. These auto style pedal boxes, the casting is still there, but it's blank because they didn't have a master cylinder, because obviously they were for an auto. Now they're very hard to get hold of manual versions of these pedal boxes with the clutch facility, because they were extremely rare because they didn't make very many manual ones. But it's not that big a job. In fact, it's a very easy job to convert the auto pedal box to a manual one. George Sinclair has already machined one of these, but obviously by necessity it has to be stripped down in order to do machining. I needed one that was built up to be able to get the brake pedal positioning correct, so that I could make sure that my mock-up clutch pedal matches the rest position of the brake in terms of height. I didn't really want to build the pedal box that we've already machined back up just to do that, because it's not a 2-minute job to build it back up, because there's a few complications inside it. And we needed another one because we're going to be using one of these pedal boxes in the Aston DBS as well. So here it is. Long story again, but this is the pedal box from Simply Performance, which will be the one that will be used in the Aston Martin, I believe. The one that we've already refurbished and machined will be the one that's going into the Portofino project, the XJC. We need a second one anyway, and this one has then given me the dimensions I need to be able to complete the pedals for the first one, and then I have all the parts and we can build that one up. Then we can strip this one down and build this one up with the correct parts, i.e. clutch pedal and brake pedal. The last bit is sorting out the pedal pads, and I need to bend the brake pedal to a straight line. The pedals have to be moved over slightly, so that needs heating and bending to get it straight. But that's what's going on with the pedal boxes, and that leads us neatly on to Aston Martin. Now, I'm going to start on the Aston Martin by the cavernous hole in the front here, because day before yesterday, Martin, we are Thursday now, so yes, on Tuesday, Martin took the bonnet for this down to ASR in Irchester again, to our friends Claire and Sean at ASR, and they've had a look at it, and I had a phone call from Claire and Sean yesterday. I spoke to Sean for a little while on the phone, which was nice. And yes, they sort of concurred with my view that it had very definitely seen better days. Yes, it was repairable, but were we particularly, what's the word? Did we have any particular views on whether we wanted to necessarily keep that particular bonnet? Did it have any sentimental attachment? That's the word. Was there a sentimental reason we wanted that bonnet? Which absolutely not. We have no sentimental reason for wanting to keep that bonnet whatsoever, because Sean pointed out he has another bonnet that would actually be much better as a basis, in that it's much more intact to start with. It needs a lot less work to get it right, and the skin is already removed from the frame, which is a fairly good step, because on the bonnet for this car, the frame and skin have been welded together in various points. The front 12 inches of the bonnet, the frame and skin have been welded together willy-nilly using unknown process. And basically the skin and the frame for at least 12 inches basically just need cutting off completely. It needs a new frame making for the front, and which ASR can do. They have the jigs to chase the frame into to do that. But it also needs the same section of the skin, which again is no problem. They can wheel that section up. They have the jigs to check it, and they can put the two together, and they've got the jig to check that. However, if you've already got a skin that doesn't need that doing, just needs the edges extending, and you've already got a frame that isn't bent to within goodness knows what mess the frame is on this one, then that's a better place to start. So Sean is just putting a plan together and going to get back to us with an idea on cost to basically extend the edges of a used but good bonnet skin, so that we have enough leeway to be able to shave it back to the aperture that we need, and then to clean up the frame, delete all the unnecessary holes in the frame, and then put the frame and the skin together for us, so that we can then shave the skin back to the aperture size we need. And just to mention, but for those not aware, on these cars, the bonnet skin isn't clinched around the frame, they're glued together, and the skin overhangs, I'll try and sort of gesticulate, basically the skin overhangs the edge of the frame. The two are just bonded together, they're glued together from the factory, but the skin is actually just a single skin at the edge. The frame has a flange, and so when you shave back to a certain point, you then start shaving into the frame and the skin. But basically they're just glued together, and it's an open edge just filled with glue, so that the water can't get in and so the two stay stuck together. But they can delaminate, and on this particular bonnet that will be used as a donor for this one, they have delaminated, which has aided in getting them apart intact, which is quite handy. But they will be glued together with an epoxy adhesive, which makes the bonnet very, very solid. But they have got an open edge, so you can shave them back to an aperture size, which is very handy. Come across that on a couple of on an Alpha. I'm trying to remember what the Alpha was now. Giulietta Sprint that we restored years ago. They had open edges on the doors and on the back of the wings, I seem to remember, with two panels just spot welded together, so that we can actually shave them back to get the door shut. So it's quite a nice way of doing it. Normally, with a bonnet where the skin's clinched round, if you start shaving it more than sort of 0.5 millimetre or so, you break through the skin and then end up having to weld the edges up, and becomes a bit of a pain. So that's that anyway. So the bonnet's over at ASR, and they're going to be getting back to us with the progress on that. We've talked about all the middle bit. Matt is now mid-working on the rear, and he's made tremendous progress this week, doing extremely well. We now have the fore part of the boot floor in position. I'll put that little light there, and you'll be able to see that possibly. So the forward part is all done, cleaned up, tidied up, in place. The fuel tank is sketched up in CAD as a block drawing, just to assess the capacity, and we can get about 110 litre tank in there without coming back past this corner here, just straight up there. In-tank fuel pump, in-tank fuel surge tank, so that's all built in, and that drop well section in the middle will accommodate the bottom part of the surge tank. So that's all very neat, and that sits into the sort of spare space inside where the rear subframe, it's not a subframe, but inside the rear frame area. That all sits into there, that sits really nicely. And then the boot floor, the outer sections, I think we mentioned last week, they were done, but Matt's just finished doing the boot floor centre section. He's cut out a blank, He's then put the spare wheel recess in on the Pell's machine using a tool we already had, actually a slightly tweaked tool that we already had. Then put a raised section in the centre of that, again just for a bit of strength and reinforcement. Put that in on the Pell's machine. Then he's made up 2 top hat sections and then profiled those top hat sections to the dip for that spare wheel well. Got those spot welded on, cleaned all that up. Stitch welded the top hat sections together because obviously he's had to make those in multiple pieces because of the shape, and then finally he put a pilot hole in for the access to the rear differential mounting bolt because that has to be fitted from inside the boot, so we're putting an access hole in for that so that bolt can be fed in from inside. And that'll be a grommeted hole once we're done. And then he's literally just walked away from this while we're doing the video because currently he's doing all his weld dressing in here. But it really is looking extremely good. He's got the capping sections finished off under here, all this rear top hat section done. The body has been fitted, he's removed it again at the moment, but the body all fits, everything works. Really, really happy with all this is coming on. So the next stage really is going to be onto the bulkhead, and at that point it'll be over to Luke in the CAD den to get things in order because we need some drawings for the bulkhead really next. So yeah, I think that's pretty much where we're at on this. We'll have a quick whiz around the body shop, I think. Let's wander over there. We'll point at some jobs over in the body shop because Gaz has been doing all manner of smaller but still significant jobs this week. So we have something in the background actually that I'm going to introduce over there. I won't introduce the whole car yet, but we have, if you cast your minds back a long, long way, we picked up the Jensen Interceptor project that we're working on was a project that had been picked up from another business where things had not necessarily gone to plan and we'd ended up picking up the job. Well, one of our customers, existing customers, has been in a similar position with another project, which is an E-Type project. It's a modified E-Type. It wasn't designed here, you know, it's been a project totally removed from us up to this point. But he's basically been in a position where he needs to get the car done, and things have fallen apart a little bit in the background on the plans that were in place with that car. So it's here now, and we will be carrying on with that. At the moment, we've just got the bonnet up here on its trolley, so that Gaz can start the prep work on that. It's an aluminium bonnet. It's a modified Series 3 E-Type bonnet. Nowhere near as modified as the Series 3 E-Type we're working on, but it is aluminium and not carbon fibre, so it'll be interesting to see a different process from a viewer's point of view. But yeah, that bonnet is up here now, ready for the start of prep work on that. We've also got the entire the main body section down in storage at the moment. We will be getting onto that. But there's no point at the moment because Gaz wouldn't be able to get onto it, and that needs to be blasted and zinc metal sprayed and various other things as well. So that's in the background, that will be coming. But yes, there will be another E-Type project to watch. Whether you like E-Types or don't like E-Types, let us know. But there will be another E-Type project to watch, so it'll be interesting to see the contrasts going on there. So that's the reason there's an E-Type bonnet in the background. You will see more E-Type in the background at some point, not just yet. Yeah, one to keep an eye on. And then golf. Gaz is on the flatting and polishing stage with golf. That's pretty much getting there now. He's just got a very light flat and polish to do on that. Finish was very, very good. So that's pretty straightforward. When the finish from the gun is good, the flatting and polishing is much easier, and the finish from the gun was good. He got a cracking job done of that, so that will go. Well, I'm going to curse this saying this now, but that should all go very, very smoothly, so we're happy with that. Then there's just sorting out a few bits of trim. Some of the bits of trim were not the best before because they're not available new, and the customer who owns this car had reused some bits of trim, some of which were a bit grotty, and in taking them off, we've kind of looked at them, and he's looked at them and said, actually, it might be better to get some new ones of those. So customer's having a look to see if he can find some, not new because they're not available new, but some better second-hand trims to replace a couple of the trims on it. We need to get the flat and polish done, and then we're just waiting for some rivets to rivet the body kit back on, and that is pretty much done at that point. And then in the booth, I believe, if we peer around the corner, Gary is currently just doing the final prep work on some rather modern parts for a project here, but a Subaru Forester, is it an XT I think they're called? Subaru Forester XT project, which is down at the Den at the moment. Not something I'm very familiar with really, or Gary for that matter. but that's in for some refreshing paint work on the front end, basically just to freshen up all the front. There was a few dinks and dents, a few stone chips, a few bits that were making it not so fresh. So that's in for some paint work, which is getting done. And some colour coding of some of the chrome bits into satin black. So that's been done. I'll let the Den side of things mention the rest of the car, but Gaz is just getting this ready to paint. So he's going over it with his water-based panel wipe as we speak. I can smell that alcohol in the air now. Yeah, bit of alcohol panel wipe to ingest in the morning. But yeah, he's having a wipe around those parts, and then it'll be presumably sealer, and then you see, seal the coat and then base and clear, well base and then clear on most of it and then satin clear on some of it, just to add a little flavour of complication. But yeah, that's what's going on in here. And I think at that point, I'm going to hand over to me in the assembly shop and we're going to have a look at what's going on in there. Well, thank you, Nat, and here you are with Nat. Here we are in the assembly shop, and I have a trusty list which Adam has very kindly scribbled down for me, because we are nearing completion on various projects and indeed doing some post-shakedown work as well, as you will be aware from previous weeks. And to that end, whilst I like to think I have a reasonable finger on the pulse of what's going on in the workshop, when we come to the smaller minor jobs near completion on projects, I'm not aware necessarily of the detail that's going on. I think that's a good thing with the business as it is now. I think it's quite good that that things can be run without me needing to be involved in every single detail of them. But obviously it feels slightly alien to me that things are going on without my awareness, but they are. And we're going to start with Camaro because quite a few little jobs have been done on this without my awareness. What I was aware of, and what Jamie's got some footage of, is it's been out on a bit of a road test. Hence the vinyl covering behind the wheels, just a bit of anti-stone chip on there just while it's being tested. But yeah, Adam's taken this out for 3, I think, little tests, literally 100 yards sort of run just to make sure that nothing fell off and that everything did what it was supposed to do. Quick check round it, then a quick run down the road and back, make sure everything was working okay, recheck fluid levels, recheck for leaks, everything good there. And then a slightly longer jaunt up the road and back, which I think Jamie's got some footage of, and yeah, all good. Nothing negative to report. Just recheck, check, recheck, take it out again, do a bit further each time, take it a bit slightly longer jaunt each time, come and recheck. Everything seems okay. There were a number of little tasks to do before that, and they're on my list here, which was that the sun visors needed fitting, and the rear view mirror, the final bits following headlining fitment at the front, they need putting in. A general spanner check prior to it going on the road. So I know George Sinclair had done a final check over this just to make sure everything was tight. And as we've mentioned before, we have a checklist and a buddy check, which we do on pretty much everything on the car. There's a checklist with a tick list and a buddy check on that checklist. So everything is double checked before we go out on the road, just to avoid stupidity. Most of the guys will do, or all the guys basically, will do an excellent job of putting a car together. But it's always possible that I come in, ask a silly question at the wrong moment, halfway through somebody doing a bolt up, and rather than telling me to naff off, which they probably should do at that point, they'll answer my question and forget that they hadn't fully torqued something. That's the sort of thing, that's the reason for the checklist. It's not because somebody doesn't know what they're doing, it's to avoid the situations where they're called away midway through doing something and then it gets missed. So that's why we have a checklist. The checklist being gone through, then the car went out on the road. There's a wireless charger fitted. That was another point actually. The centre console had been done, but the wireless charger needed fitting in that was done. And following the very short initial test, the ride heights needed a tweak. The car settled a little bit following an initial little run around the yard, I think that was. Ride heights settled down a little bit, so they were tweaked up. And the front grills were fitted. They've been fitted before, they've been removed to do various other tasks, including the bonnet pins and various alignments of the front end. So they needed refitting, which they have now been. As you'll be aware, there's a few little bits of trim still to be fitted, and the scuttle panel needs refitting, but that's, I believe that's awaiting paint at the minute. I think we had a bit of an incident with that, so that needed repainting. So that was pretty much where we're at on that. And then yes, Adam, as it's prompting me on my list, Adam has written a little snag list of very minor things that just want checking or tweaking. And then this will be back out on the road again, either tomorrow or Monday, I would say, for a slightly longer run. We'll get some, I think we've got some fuel in it now. I think we've stuck 40 litres of fuel in it, so it can have a bit of a longer test. And then it's really just, yeah, getting a few miles on it and finding out. The only way you know, the only way you get to the bottom of any problems is really, unless you've built the car terribly badly, the only way you find the problems is by driving it a bit and using it and seeing what happens. But I think we can certainly all agree it sounds absolutely awesome. I mean, an LS3 V8 always sounds pretty nice, but it does sound particularly brutal in this. The 480 spec engines, the camshafts, I believe, are widely regarded as a little bit of they're not the best cam that GM ever made, but they do give it a nice little bit of an idle lope, and that slightly lumpy idle, which does sound very muscle car. It suits it down to the ground. It's quite a thing now. It's become kind of part of the scenery for so long. We've just seen it as the Camaro, but now seeing it out on the road and hearing it out on the road, suddenly the wow factor kicks back in, and yes, it's really very impressive. So yeah, that's great. Just out of camera shot, we have Sarah. We're not going to put her on camera because she's only quite young. She is here doing some work experience, which was good. She has badgered us endlessly for quite some time about coming to do some work experience, and we've had this at times in the past, and we've had members of staff here that have basically come to work for us via the medium of badgering us for a long period of time. That goes for a number of the staff that we still have here. They basically badgered us into giving them jobs in a few cases, and our work experience girl Sarah, who is here today and for the next few days, is a case in point on that. She's been very keen to come and see us, so we're letting her have a little bit of time in various different parts of the workshop. She's been in the assembly shop this morning. She's now doing a little bit of CAD Cave stuff with Luke, so she's going to do some scanning in a little bit with Luke. She'll help him out with some of the slightly mind-numbing application of the reflective dots for using the scanner, but also big eye-opener seeing, I think they've just been through using the CNC plasma cutter. So she's learning, absorbing a whole lot of stuff around the business, and I see a lot of comments regarding getting young people into the business. Well, we don't really have too much of a problem. If you look at a cross-section of our staff, with a couple of exceptions, I'm the old one. Much as I don't like it, I'm kind of the old one. We've got a pretty young team, really, for working on the types of vehicles we work on, and we want to kind of maintain that. So I'm very keen. It's always difficult to find the time, but I'm very keen that we do maintain interest of younger people getting involved in this sort of business, because obviously, it sounds cliche, they're the future and all this, but they are. And also, young people's brains work fast. They learn fast. That's how the business moves forward. It doesn't move forward by fuddy-duddies doing the same thing they've always done. It moves forward by young people bringing in ideas and doing stuff quickly and learning things quickly. So anyway, off that, there's no footage of that because, as I say, we can't really publicise footage of school children doing their work experience here. But needless to say, I think Sarah's having a nice time. She's an avid watcher of the channel as well, hasten to add. So here we are with Austin Allegro next. I'm going to put my little list down because there are a number of other lists here. And first one of which is George Sinclair's little list of torque specs. So he has been using the interweb and some manuals that he's got and various other sources of information to collate a list of safety critical and generally important, not suitable to just tighten it, suspension bolts. And he's put that in his little notebook so he can work from that. Then he's got the checklist on there, and then that's got the buddy check on the end, and the checklist there, and then the paint mark section just there, and the photograph section just there. Now, we don't necessarily photograph all of them, but we tick them if there is a photograph. And then there's the paint marks. Now, the paint mark system we have, where we have white and yellow, and there should be a blue as well. But we basically use different paint marks according to whether we're just going tight, whether it's torqued, or whether it's Loctited. So if it's yellow paint mark, it's been torqued. If it's white, it's just tight. And if it's blue, it's Loctited. So we know from the paint mark that we've used the process that's been done. So if we know we've got a blue paint mark on something, you do not recheck it, because if you recheck it, you'll break the Loctite. As we know, if it's white, it's just a fastener that needs to just be made tight. There's no specific reason it has to be torqued to a specific value. If it's yellow, it's generally a safety critical or it's an engine fastener where it is critical that it is done to a specific torque, and that's why we have a paint code system for our paint marks. And yeah, basically George has been going over doing the final checks on this. I think he's fitted the seat. I seem to remember that wasn't in because James had been doing some work on the trim, which I'm sure James will have covered. So we're getting it basically into a position where we can actually get it on the road and test drive this, because we need to initially do some mapping. It's very roughly mapped at the moment. It's just an initial startup map. So this has been driven. Adam's driven this around the workshop earlier. So it's in a state it can be driven, but it needs to be mapped, and that's the next stage. We're just getting the whole car spanner checked and ready in a ready state to be mapped. So that's what's been going on that. We'll check my list in case I've missed anything. I don't think I've missed too much, really. We were doing the final steps on the idle air control valve. You will remember from previous episodes we've had various traumas in terms of the idle air control on this, but we now have a setup and a system and a plan which is working in terms of idle air control. So the final bits of that have been put together, And yeah, so the next phase on this really is finish off those checks, which I think George is pretty much there with, and then get it mapped and then get it on the road. So really getting really close. I'm very excited. I've said it before, it's one of my favourite projects that we've ever built this. It seems strange, it's an Austin Allegro, but it really is one of my favourites. It's quite a thing, and I think it's probably the closest we've come to a volume production car build in our workshop. It's really impressive bit of kit, if I do say so myself. And then moving on around here, we have a thank you to say. I'm going to use an AJ16 as my coffee cup prop. However, we had a couple of niggles on this. First one of which was related to that, which is not a spring. That is the threads from one of the head bolts. Now, strangely, for a largely metric engine, these actually use a 7/16 UNC head bolt. And unfortunately, one of those 7/16 UNC head bolts was snapped off in the block. So we need to get that out. So George Sinclair has been busy doing that, and in doing that he also discovered that one of the sump bolts was snapped off in the block, which we didn't actually know about, or we'd forgotten if we did. So he machined out the broken off sump bolt, and got that rethreaded, and then he flipped the block over in the mill, got that set up in the mill, and machined out we ordered a carbide drill for the tapping drill size for 7/16 UNC. I can't remember. I think it was a 9.3 millimeter solid carbide drill. So then he's got it set up in the mill, found the center, drilled out with a solid carbide drill through the head bolt. The head bolts are incredibly soft, which wasn't what I expected, which is why I'd said we ought to get a solid carbide drill. As it is, they might as well have been made of cheese. They're unbelievably soft. So drilling it out was absolutely dead easy. It drilled like mild steel at best. So we got the head bolt drilled out, and then that was the result of pulling out the remainder of the thread. Once we've gone through it with that carbide drill, that literally just pulled out. So we now have a good thread back on all the head bolts. And the next phase with this was hanging in the balance a little bit, because you may recall from a previous engine we built, there is a bit of a problem with these. Pistons, in terms of OE type pistons, are unavailable. Now, I'm now been made aware of the fact that their aftermarket piston design is available now, but is obviously quite expensive, and it's a forged piston in the aftermarket, and I'll explain who you'll be able to get those from if you want them in just a second. But we were in a bit of a chicken and egg situation with a number of things on this engine. I'll try and do this in a methodical way, because I'm not very good at explaining things in order sometimes. The problems were that pistons are basically not available. Piston rings turned out to also not be available at all. Main bearings, we had the last set in the country as far as we were aware for the last engine, the Churchill engine, and big end bearings are also not really available. Now, the bearings, King Bearings, make the bearings. They make main bearings and big end bearings for these engines. However, when we built the previous engine, both of those, the mains and big ends, are out of spec. I don't think they're made actually for this engine. I think they're cross-referenced from something else. But certainly when we measured them up, they are way out of tolerance. Certainly if you built an engine with those bearings in without taking an enormous amount of care of what you ground the crankshaft to, you would be in for a whole world of pain, because they are not to size. Those bearings, certainly the sets we've had, are not to size. They're way out of tolerance. So that's one of the problems. As I say, the other problem was that the pistons and rings are not available. Now, we got around that on Churchill by various means. However, it left us a bit stuck on this one. So I made a phone call to a very helpful man who many of our viewers will have heard of, probably via either his own channel or via Harry's Garage, and that is Tom Lenthal, who is a specialist in all things Jaguar and Land Rover, but particularly Jaguar. And he's an extremely helpful chap. He was very happy to have a chat. And he had a friend who happened to have some AJ16 piston rings. Now, I wouldn't go queuing up on the phone to ring him, because he had two sets, and that's it. And that's all the ones he knows of in existence. One set which Tom is keeping because he needs them, and the other set which we bought. So I'm afraid there are no more. But that did solve a problem for us on this engine, because in talking to Tom there was another potential solution, which is that Tom has had pistons made for these engines, so he can get a forged, I believe they're CP, but he'll probably stand and correct me now. I can't remember, but I think he said they were CP pistons and Carrillo rods. So he has had steel rods and forged pistons made in the States for these engines, which he uses in his race engine, I believe. But obviously they're not particularly cheap, and in an engine that's chiefly for a road car would be deemed a little excessive. It's probably, even though we're not building to a strict budget, it would be a bit excessive to throw steel rods and forged pistons into an engine that is basically going to be original spec plus a little bit. We'll go a little bit more with the supercharger, but not a lot. But the problem is now solved, because now we have these piston rings here stacked up on this greaseproof paper. We have the facility to now re-ring the standard pistons, and we know from doing the previous engine that we can machine these original press fit and Loctited in liners out. Not that that's a particularly easy job, but they can be machined out, replaced with a Westwood liner, which is not intended for this engine, but can be machined to the correct size to make it fit this engine, albeit at a little bit of a hassle. So we can re-liner this block back to standard bore, reuse these, which are the standard pistons, with those new rings that we've now got. Thank you very much to Tom Lenthal. So we can now put this back together with the standard pistons, the new rings, and reline it back to standard bore, and we have a reasonably economically built standard, chiefly standard AJ16 bottom end for not a crazy amount of money. You know, if we went for the forged parts, it would probably multiply the cost of doing that job by nearly 3. So there's a bit of expenditure involved there. That simplified the job. So thank you again, Tom Lenthal. I am quite sure we will speak again about many things. Very helpful chap. Anything Jaguar, speak to Tom. Very helpful man indeed. But I'm sure you're probably aware of that anyway. You've probably already seen him on his channel and Harry's Garage there. So thank you again. So that is literally about to go. Martin's milling around in the background waiting to take this block and that piston over to the machine shop we use in Nuneaton, who are going to be getting all those liners machined out, and they will no doubt be ecstatic to receive that job, because I can tell now that Mick is not going to look at that with a face of delight when he sees that, who will be the man that's machining that out. He loved doing the last one. To give you an idea of the precision needed to get these out, the Westwood liner, we don't want to thin out the aluminium on this, so we don't want to take anything out of the original block here. We want to just take the liner out back to the aluminium, but not go back into the aluminium at all. And he actually managed on all 6 pots on the last one to take these out just into the Loctite, onto the chemical glue basically that holds those liners in. He managed to break through to the glue on every bore without touching the aluminium. That's quite tricky. We'll see. I'm hoping he can do that again. We do have a spare block if something goes wrong, but I'm hoping we don't need that. So moving on from that, I think that's covered XJC in suitable detail, and finally we'll just do a passing spin over the Morris, because that has been involving a little bit of time. Toby has been working on fitting the arch liners. We've decided to put wheel arch liners in the front wheel arches because they're a bit prone to stone damage. We've discovered that stones firing up off the front wheels can cause paintwork damage on the front wing by knocking through. So we want to put something to repel stones a bit more in there. And to that end, Toby's been making up some stainless steel brackets that pick up off the wing mounting bolts, and then they will carry some retaining bolts to hold a polypropylene arch liner in place, made of 3mm thick polypropylene shaped to the inner arch shape, which will then prevent the stones smashing up into the inside, the reverse face of the outer part of the wing. So that will protect that. Consult my list in case I've missed anything here. Yes, there's we had an issue where we were having excessive breathing of liquid ATF out of the power steering fluid reservoir. We had some issues with this car when we first set the power steering up on it, for various reasons that we got to the bottom of at the time but escaped me now. But the solution to those problems was basically baffling the power steering fluid reservoir more, which we've done, but it's still slightly lacking. So Toby has now done some revisions to the power steering reservoir baffling just to prevent that oil coming out of the breather. Yes, the front wheel spray deflectors that you'll have seen in gaudy plastic 3D printed colours previously have now been printed in their final material, in the carbon reinforced nylon final material on the old bamboo printers, and Luke's done a bit of prep ready for paint, and then they're going to be painted in Raptor, in a black Raptor finish, as a bit of a spray and stone deflector from the front wheels. And then the last two things were we're trying to get the exhaust to be a little bit quieter. We found one of the reasons perhaps that the exhaust might not have been as quiet as it can, because it's very hard to pack. With the design of the rear silencer, there's a cavity that probably could have done with more packing in it. However, it needs to be very small, like the rope style packing, or the what's known as the popcorn style packing, to be able to get in there. So we've got some of that on order. As soon as we've got that, we're going to put that expanding popcorn type packing in there, which will be able to get all around the pipe, where at the moment the packing was a bit lacking. So hopefully we can get that a bit better, which should knock down the resonance on the rear silencer a little bit. And then very last thing, because I can see it right in front of me, was the sort of crazy problems that you get. We were getting some misting up of this instrument. It's made by Classic Instruments. We were getting some misting up of this under certain conditions, certain temperature conditions, and this was due to moisture getting into the gauge. Now, we know liquid moisture wasn't getting in, but the concern was that atmospheric moisture was getting in. So with a view to limiting that as much as possible, there was a non-airtight grommet on this section here, which gave access to part of the internals of the gauge, and then there was a cavity around here with access for setting up the gauge and for the plug that communicates with the rest of the car. So to solve that, Adam has made a neoprene closed cell foam gasket that basically surrounds the plug and covers up the back of the gauge to prevent too much of an exchange of air going through there. And then George has just whipped up a very quick little drawing in CAD and then 3D printed on the bamboo printer in about 20 minutes. This little cover, which clicks into the grommet hole, is made of nylon, closes that grommet hole off, but also has a little cavity where we can put a silica gel sachet, which is inside that little cover, so that any moisture that does exchange in and out of this will be dried out by that little silica gel sachet. So hopefully that should reduce any chance of misting up happening when there's big temperature differences across the instrument. So that is, I think, probably a good point to finish on all of the stuff down here. And at that point, I think it's time to hand over to the CAD guys upstairs and let them illustrate what they've been up to up there. So over to you guys.
Hi guys, welcome back to the Catacombs. Thank you very much to the YouTube comments for that one. That was actually a very brilliant one, and that did make us laugh. You will probably notice I'm looking very dusty right now. There is a reason for that, I'm not just dirty. I have been downstairs in the paint booth, fillering and sanding the join line basically on the Morris arch flaps. You would have seen me doing a little bit of work relating to that over the last few weeks, and now that I'm back from holiday, did a bit of travel testing on the prototype, did a small edit just to move it a little bit down because it was literally just clipping the bolt on the top, but edited that, printed the final parts, bonded them together, and then I've just been down in paint shop basically fillering that bond line, and then so when Gaz paints it, it will look all nice and smooth. So hopefully by end of week they can go on the car, which is fantastic. I've also been doing a little bit of clearance related work and fixing related work to do with the quattro front grills. Just little things that I missed because I was only given the bumper when I designed them, and there's just a few things on the back that needed clearance for, but that's now sorted. And then one of the main things over at Retropower that I've been on with has been the Churchill door cards. I built up the entire lower section of the door card, which Jamie can get some footage of in a second. Did a few paper templates for the mounting holes of that, laid that over the actual backing card, drilled the holes and got the lower part mounted. At some point either later today or first thing tomorrow morning, I'm actually going to put the door card on the car, and then I'm going to put the top section, which is all bonded together behind me, The way it works is it basically hooks over the top of the door and onto the door card. So I'm going to basically do that, mark out the bottom line for the door card, and then do the same process of making a paper template, drilling out the holes, and then getting that mounted on as well. So I can then hand that over to James to trim, who's been doing a fantastic job on the Quattro roof trims, which I gave him end of last week. He's had them trimmed and he's kind of held them up in the car, sent me a photo of them, and they look fantastic, so I'm really chuffed with that. And then I've done a few little bits as well, stuff like on the 500 SEC, they've got a new center console. Given that you obviously can't get new parts for stuff like this anymore, had a snapped support section, so I went over and got that this morning. I've remade that support section so I can cut out the old one and bond in a whole new one, so that keeps its strength. And then, yeah, just I think I'm going to keep this one short and sweet, this one. But I shall hand over back to George. Thank you very much.
Hello, thank you, Luke. So this week I have been on with a smattering of different things as always. First of all is making a replica of a Vulcan bomber. No, I'm joking. This is the intake, a prototype intake for the E-Type, which we've got printed. And I've been stitching together using a method we've kind of started using for our prototypes, which is working really well. I'll let Jimmy get some glam footage of in a bit because it looks quite cool. It looks like a Frankenstein's monster stitching type scenario. So yeah, I've put that together and built that. I've also put this together, which is the second prototype of the E-Type cover for the tanks, which is vaguely the same as the original one, but we've flattened it all out so it aesthetically looks a lot more similar to the AC on the other side of the car. So when you look in the engine bay, we're trying to keep the engine bay effectively symmetrical. So that kind of does that, and it also tweaks some little gremlins we were having with the other prototype. Aside from that, I've been learning a new software, which I mentioned last week, and I'm going to keep fairly short and sweet because you don't want to hear me talking about me shouting at a screen. But in short terms, I've been learning a new software called EX Model, which is potentially the software we're going to be using with a potential new scanner we're going to be getting. At the moment, I'm kind of stress testing it to see if it's actually going to work for us and if it's going to do everything we're doing. But as anyone knows, if you've gone from one software which is very similar to another software, the features are normally in there which you're looking for, they're just hidden behind invisible walls, which is what my week's been looking like, of trying to find features which this software has, which our old software does have as well. So yeah, that's effectively what I've been doing, and I'm going to keep it there because why not? So thank you, bye.
Well, thank you very much for that, George. And I think at that point, I'm going to hand over to the Den. Well, James at the Den and the rest of the Den, and let them take you through what's been going on at the other building and see what excitement has been occurring down there.
Hi guys, me again, I'm back. Nick isn't on holiday yet, he's a little bit disorganised and forgot he got the wrong week, but I'm going to suspend him because he's a right weirdo. What idiot puts milk in first when you make a cup of tea? That's a wrong one, isn't it? He ain't right. Anyway, let's get back to the cars. The Lupo is practically done. It's had its 2 maiden voyages road tests this week. I did notice one thing is that due to the turbo being down the back, it was creating a lot of heat on the clutch master cylinder. So I have made up a nice heat shield to just protect that firewall and protect all the piping behind it. Jamie will get a photo of that later, I'm sure he will. It drives brilliant. It's an animal, absolute animal. It's fun, but it wants to kill you. It's scary, but it's great. I love it. Porsche. This last week was having spark plugs and 2 lambda sensors because we were having issues with the emissions on MOT. So that's all done now, running sweet as a nut. That is now currently just waiting on Chris to give it its detailing all over. I think it's going to have wheels off, then be fully ceramic coated. 3-day job of that one. So you'll see that next week in the detailing booth, no doubt. The SEC, so we had the new wheels turn up, which look absolutely spanking. We got a little bit of rubbing on full lock on the front springs. So we've ordered some spacers, and of course, because it's an old Mercedes, nothing fits. So we've gone through about 3 spacers now. Finally got the right ones, woo! But then we found out the wheel bolts are too long. So we've ordered a new set of those, but by the by, we're getting on quite well with that. We're just waiting for some more stuff to come back for 3D printing for the intake. then we can pull it off, and then Jay can start building up the interior with that spankingly gorgeous blue leather interior. So that's the SEC. We have, so the CSL, my car. Nick won't have it, but I'm telling him it's my car. My phone is paired to the stereo on this since I've done the Bluetooth, so it makes it mine. I don't care what he says, but anyway, that's all done. That's going to be detailed and put under cover. The Cappuccino, it's on hold for a little bit because we've got a couple of other jobs that we want to get on top of before we pull this in, gives the customer a bit of a break. We've also got a few bits on order, engine mounts, gearbox, inlet manifold. So there's a lot of stuff there that we're waiting on before we can progress anyway, so it's a good time to put it on a hold. So that's that. Over here, you guys, I'm sure you will recognise this absolute beaut of a car, this Mustang. The paintwork on this it's just so deep and looks like you could dive into it. I am a massive fan of this car. It is, oh, yeah. Anyway, mechanically wise, it's in for an oil and filter change. We had an oil leak from the diff. That's just an O-ring. I'll just, Joe, if you want to pop over. So part of the nose of the diff, it's got this O-ring in here. So this O-ring here has failed, and it was just weeping out the bottom, and then it was dragging all the way down the back of the diff and leaking on his garage floor, which is quite good that he's pointed it out so we get the opportunity to get on it. So the people that built the diff, they're sending us an O-ring out, and we'll have that rebuilt in no time. We also had a weepage from these fittings here for the transmission oil cooler. They just seem to be passing out of these seals on both of these, so we're going to take these back, get them tested. I don't think there's a replacement seal in them, but I'm going to leave it with the guys that make the fittings, maybe new ones. But yet again, not a biggie, shan't take too long. Nothing to report on the Metro. We're just waiting for the customer to come back to us. Yeah. Subaru Forester. Can't remember how you saw this last week. So the front bumper is having new front bumper, new wing, bonnet painted. That'll all be getting reassembled. The wheels should be getting collected today, and he's gone for a nice bronze. Initially we were going to go for a two-tone, which was going to be bronze face with black inset. He changed his mind, went full bronze, which I think cracking idea. I think that looked quite nice when they come back. Let's have a look at what Owen has been doing on a Lexus. If Jay wants to come in nice and close, I think Owen has outdone himself on this. It looks brilliant. He's gone through the whole of the underside, which you knew about, cleaning it, wax oiled in the inner arches on both sides. He's done all the underneath. This car is going to look absolutely spanking when it's done. Yeah, it's work of art what he's been doing. The radiator's in, AC condenser's in. We've got a pile of bits over there which are going away for powder coat and zinc plating. They should be going away today, so that'll probably maybe a week or two for those to be back done. And I think, to be fair, that's about it. I'd like to say thank you very much for watching. Greatly appreciated. I want to say thank you to Derek, because he's always giving me good feedback. No hardship about the little dwarf comment. I took it in great jest. Fair comment. Great. The other guy, I can't remember, Paul Hollywood. Now, I like cake and I like bread. Can I bake it? Can I hell? But that's another story. But yeah, thanks a lot. I'm going to pass you up to James.
Hi, welcome back to the trim shop. This week, what have I told you about using Rich's scissors?
Rich won't mind.
Clear off.
Stop you.
God. These mechanics, man. Right, so this week Ellie has finished the steering wheel for the 500 SEC, if that's what it's called. Yeah, that's what it's called. That looks great. Just got to do a bit of heating on it, finish it off, and yeah, that looks really smart. She decided on going, we found a steering wheel that had wood on the top and the bottom, because we couldn't quite work out how to get the blue in there. So obviously instead of the wood we did the blue. then your hands are going to hold the black, the blue won't get discoloured, and it will look great in the car. So looking forward to fitting that back in. Well, back on the Merc, sorry, we've got the centre console to trim now. That's been given the go-ahead. So we've got a new centre console, which obviously is the wrong colour. We're going to be trimming that black, which I've just started to do here, just trying to see if the leather will go round. Thought about putting stitching up here, but there's no other stitching in the car, so I think it would be a bit out of place. So we're going to try and keep it as smooth as possible. A few seams in there and there, just so the leather will go round nicely. The new one was broken, so we've 3D printed a new panel for that. So we're just going to cut and bond that in. So that'll be all back to really nice. So that's all ready for next week. Churchill, you'll see a lot of leather here, a lot of different diamonds. So next week we should be quilting all the oversized panels for the seats and hopefully get the headlining machined and all put together. And then the wood can be bonded in, and we can hopefully next week or the week after finally staple that in and see how it looks, see how we're going to finish that. Been testing some samples. Ellie's been doing it with some non-woven on the back just to try and get it the definition in the diamonds, so that's should be fine. There should be some shots of Martin. He's making some like a metal skirt around the front of this seat for me. So because we're not putting that much foam on, we want to make the seat give the appearance of more depth. So we're going to put a metal panel around, leather it down, so it just makes the seat look a lot deeper and more in keeping with the car. So Martin's going to crack on with that for me, and he's also going to fix the backrest in for me. So then once that's all done, make sure it all fits nice, and then I can crack on with the foam in and pattern it. And also there's the Allegros. So I went yesterday, just bolted the seat in for them so they can drive it around the yard. And tomorrow I'm going to go glue the carpet in, and yeah, that's really looking good. Really happy with the Allegro. I know I've only done like 30% of it, but it just looks so cool, and I'm claiming it for myself, so that's all good. And yeah, I shall see you next week.
Thanks, James. Great update, even though I did pinch your scissors. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you next week. Hopefully Nat was happy with what I've done. Catch you later.